Okay, welcome. Hi, it's Alan here. Hope you can see me in the small window in the corner. I'll spare you the large version. I'll keep the slideshow showing. But welcome. We've got a really nice cross section of attendees today from a variety of continents. So I'm just admitting people in as I talk. Yeah, nice cross section of people from across different continents. I'm looking down my list: Asia, the USA, the UK, team in a lecture room in Copenhagen and a lecture room in a business school in London. So welcome everybody. Hope you can hear me loud and clear. I think it's fair to say that while we have got a variety of industries, variety of geographies, there is a common denominator, and I think listening to the feedback, and that is that everyone's eager to accelerate revenue growth as a CRO or in anybody that's in a revenue growth role, and obviously to increase your personal performance. So hopefully, some of the topics today will hit the mark. I'm going to make this a nice, fast and furious session. I've got 45 minutes laid out, but I'm hoping to do that nice and quickly within that time to keep your busy diaries free. Um, this topic, silo busting, aligning sales, marketing, customer success, frankly, in any other silo that operates within your own organization, within your own empire and beyond. Notice that when you look at SEO, it defines breaking down boundaries as the most searched item for CROs, this issue of getting collaboration across the boundaries. So I'm going to talk really about 8 specific tactics with hopefully some practical ideas to bring those to life in each of those 8 topics. And I don't want these to be really just to come across as one-offs. I want them to, underpin sustainable growth, which is, of course, what we're all looking for. So some ideas that you can continue on an ongoing basis. And the purpose of this session is really just to provoke a bit of thought, right? This won't necessarily be a set of new topics for you, but it might just provoke some thought and act as a reminder. And maybe the reflection from everybody here is to just think, how might this relate to me and to my role? So the agenda, a little bit of an introduction, further introduction, and then just as a little backdrop, just a slide on what's going on, what's the kind of backdrop to the world that CROs or indeed growth leaders are operating within. And then we'll get straight into the 8 tactics that I just wanted to highlight as little tips for how to help break down those boundaries. Feel free to use chat, by the way, if anybody has a question or wants to ping me any information back. Always feels a bit lonely when you're hosting these webinars and it's a bit one way. So don't be shy. If you have a question or you want to make a point, please do. Also, at the end, I want to just talk about some free tools that willing to just share with you at any time. Just reach out. But there's a number of tools and techniques that I've got in the kit bag that you're welcome to have, and I'll share those at the end for you. Just a real brief introduction about me in case some of you don't know who I am. This kind of summary is that I spent my very formative years, in fact, really formative years, when I was still wearing shorts as a professional sportsman. So I've got that sports DNA within me around, trying to win and trying to work brilliantly as a team. I'm not saying I did it perfectly every time, but certainly got that team spirit, which is relevant to today's topic, within me in my DNA. But my formative years, sort of in parallel with some of my early professional sport levels, was always in large corporate companies, despite the fact that I always wanted to work for a small business. I kept working for bigger ones. But you can see the kind of type of businesses: Shell, BT Global Services, Cable and Wireless, that I worked for. And my last sort of what I'd call my last job as a practitioner, as an operator, was running the kind of corporate half of WorldPay, which some of you may know as a large fintech company and payments company, which was owned actually by 2 private equity companies, Bain and Advent, who, when I left WorldPay, which was nearly sort of 8 years ago, I spent the last 8 years working with private equity companies, these 2 in particular, jumping into their portfolio businesses and helping their companies that they've bought as a commercial excellence sort of leader, help them write their blueprint and help them accelerate revenue growth. And that's very much alongside the CEO and the CRO, with tool sets and so on and so forth, what I'll hopefully share with you today. Also do some work with Alex Partners. But I guess the summary is I've got that experience of blue chip and private equity background, and that sort of results-driven DNA from my time in sport. And then why did I create Octillion, which is the business that I run, apart from needing to build the private equity companies for my time? In parallel, Yeah, having spent all my life doing that stuff, I've spent the last 7 years supporting other people like yourselves in executing this stuff. And really, the observation I've made is that the CRO is still a very new role. I'm not sure, certainly within the USA, maybe 15 years worth of CRO terminology. In the Europe, even less. But what I've discovered is that support for chief revenue officers, and indeed, frankly, any leader in that growth role is pretty sparse, whether that's formally or informally. And it's also quite an exposed role. There's quite high expectations, aren't there, with growth, and growth is pretty damn difficult. And there's lots of theory on some of the individual elements of the CRO role, isn't there? That's sales, methodology. There's some marketing methodology, but there's no sort of umbrella level, exec level content or support. At least nothing that I've really found, bit sparse. So I'm continually asked for practical, easy to understand, easy to execute, simple methodology, to help accelerate revenue growth, but in a way that isn't, reams and reams of documentation. We're all busy people, and we need this stuff on a page rather than in a book. So I've effectively, I've gone through the qualifications of the CRO role. I've done it myself. I've accumulated tons of knowledge and experience. I'm not saying I know everything, but I've certainly seemed to have gathered a lot of knowledge and blue chip content. And I've crystallized that and if effectively democratized that for effective and simple execution. So there's no jargon in what I tend to talk about. It's really trying to distill this down to the basics. And I deliver that in the form of one-to-one coaching and mentoring with those tools, and of course, in my advisory capacity for portfolio companies. Anyway, reach out to me if you want to learn a bit more. That's the end of the advert. But I'm here to help if you need it. So, what am I hearing as I walk the corridors? And please feel free to reflect and agree or disagree with what I'm saying here. But these are just some of the top six things that I'm hearing. The kind of issues that CROs are talking to me about. It's all very well talking about long-term blueprints, but I've got 90 days to frankly survive, in many cases, certainly to show progress. Lots of numerous platforms, technologies. Let's not get into the AI topic, which adds another layer of complexity and excitement, doesn't it? Being asked to do more with less, feel pretty out of control due to the lack of information. A lot of data, but not much information. We put a lot of posters on the wall around customers at the heart of our business, but actually we spend most of our time talking about internal stuff. And this one, which is really the highlight of today, our business operates frankly in silos and is rubbish at collaborating. Um, so the punchline is, for the way I look at it, is that CROs are facing increased complexity, a lot of noise, which is distracting, a lot of conflict, and a lot, frankly, a lack of control, and that all leads to a lot of stress. So the challenge is how do we do that, and despite all this stuff, and how do we kind of try and make life a bit easier for ourselves? Well, um, silos. Let's focus on this one then, and the theme of the day. Why does this matter? I mean, very simply, fragmented organizations kill revenue growth. They're an absolute, treacle across the whole of the department, whole of the business, frankly, if you have this fragmentation. And for me, that one word confusion encapsulates it. Confusion, is an ambiguity. It creates ambiguity of direction, ambiguity of priorities. And that then leads to things like slow execution. I witness a lot of self-doubt in management teams because they're not totally sure if they're in line with what other people are doing across the organization or indeed across just the CRO's function. And you see that lack of accountability, lack of responsibility. So for CROs, confusion is frankly a complete lack of control. Yeah. Now, I see a lot of siloed organizations, and for me, they are the opposite of a customer-centric organization. I often see uncoordinated approaches to the same customer, inconsistent customer messaging, and timing of that messaging as well from different departments, and then, frankly, sometimes competing profit centers. I'm sure some of these resonate with the people on this call. One of the early examples that I tend to think about actually, I remember HubSpot and some of their early struggles, probably back in the 2000s actually. They fixed a lot of this stuff now, but a really strong marketing background. And they generated tons of leads through content, if you might remember, blogs, ebooks, webinars, and that sort of stuff. However, their sales team complained that their leads were often very low quality. People who downloaded an ebook maybe enjoyed the ebook but had no real interest or, frankly, any budget to buy anything. And yet, marketing measured the success in lead volume. Sales needed qualified leads, real potential buyers. And there's a huge, massive frustration built up in HubSpot's business. And I remember talking to some of the guys and girls there, and sales were saying these leads suck. Marketing said, we're giving you thousands, you're bad at closing. So essentially, the teams are completely misaligned and didn't even know what a good lead was or how to describe it. So you can imagine the usual kind of results were the lower conversion rates, a lot of friction, and actually very slow early growth. Now, eventually they sorted it out. But effectively, the different goals they had led to very different behaviors and, frankly, a bad result. So I just think using this as an example, I do think that in many ways, SaaS businesses have kind of shone a light on this, silo issue more than most companies in recent years, because you see the handoff between the funnel stages, especially between marketing and sales and customer success or account management, are much closer and much more dependent. So the friction when it exists in a SaaS business is a lot more damaging and frankly more immediate. And also, as I said earlier, I think the CRO role is still quite immature. There's a lot of learning still going on. So the ability to conduct the proverbial orchestra is still a little bit of a learning curve for many people and many businesses. And the other observation I've had, and I've seen this across a number of portfolio businesses, and again, this may resonate with some of the people today, is that many businesses have kind of morphed into different shapes and sizes, perhaps driven by some of their acquisitions, inorganic growth or expansion into different geographies, different regions, as well as just natural scope creep. But the consequences can be highly damaging when that organization hasn't been knitted together, let alone the revenue driving parts of that organization, to support that common and united goal, which is obviously to accelerate profitable revenue growth and in a sustainable way. I've evangelized regularly on the importance of customer centricity, and if you read the books, there's a direct correlation to profitability. Um, and one of the most critical influences of customer centricity lies in the construct of the organization. Okay. Don't need to go into this in enormous depth, but the empowerment of customer engaged people is critical, but it's going to be destroyed if the rest of the organization isn't brought into line to support them. So the location of authority in the organization and the structure itself are absolutely vital if you want to create a collaborative and a successful operating model. So the operating model, the org structure, if you like, is a critical enabler in creating a unified team. But even when the structure looks good, I still witness quite a lot of dysfunctional behavior, political agendas, uncoordinated initiatives, little cottage industry sort of projects have, just, operating within, squirreled away in different parts of the organization. So I appreciate that the operating model, the org chart, is critical, but I don't want to focus on it today because it's a big topic, and frankly, every organization looks different, and yours will look different to mine. So I'm just going to move away from the operating model when I come onto these 8 ideas. And really, what I've done is I've collated from my own personal experience as a practitioner and in my advisory capacity, some just simple, really simple things that I've deployed within those companies and in my own companies and with CROs that I've been coaching over the last few years. And I've also consciously selected these 8 because they're things that could work across a variety of businesses. It doesn't matter whether you're a SaaS organization, you're selling more traditional products and services, whether you're large or small, frankly, or any geography. Hopefully, these will resonate. And I'm not suggesting, by the way, that you don't know about these tactics. They're not new. But again, I just want to provoke some thought. Can any of these work in my environment? So let's kick on. Number 1. I mean, some of these might sound really obvious, right, and boring, but I have to say, I don't mind if you find this one boring because there should only ever be one North Star in your company, right? People across any organization, regardless of any internal boundaries, need to understand what's being asked of them and that it makes sense. Because believing in the why we're doing this inspires them to behave in support of the agenda. And again, this should be company wide as well as CRO wide, CRO functionality wide, right? Because despite the fact there are some core divisions under the CRO's guidance, marketing, sales, customer success, account management, etc., service, product management, even the IT team, they all need to be galvanized around this one vision. You can't have multiple visions. You can't have ambiguity. Okay, really, really important. Without this, everything else becomes really tough. And it doesn't have to be anything, magnificent or complex, but just something simple that everybody galvanizes around. And it needs to be something that they can rally around. It does need to be inspirational, but it needs to be simple and clear, right? And supported by a business plan, of course. I always think, though, that this vision and the story that you tell around the vision needs to demonstrate believable impacts on the customer experience. How do we make their world better, right? In other words, if everyone in the organizations understands if we behave in this way, we create value for our customers and then for value for us, and it's worth doing, right? So people have got to believe in it, and that vision must be customer centric, right? By definition, thinking about it outside in externalizes people's minds. It tends to avoid the internal noise and the boundaries. We're talking about the customer's world and what we're doing as a business to make our customers better, help them win their business, easier, etc., etc. So internally, it's got nothing to do with us and our silos. We're all galvanized around the same thing. Nothing is more important than enriching the lives of customers. Yeah. Okay. I think also, just as a little side note to finish on this, it's also critical to say what you're not going to do. This gives permission to stop some of these random half-baked initiatives that I talked about earlier on. That everybody has them in pockets of the business, don't they? I'm sure you do. Little things that legacy silos love to do. It gives you a permission to stop doing them. Um, Top line goals and objectives must be common across teams, right? For example, growing revenues, minimizing churn, increasing customer satisfaction, right? Those things are vital for everybody in the organization to share. Now, of course, everybody has different responsibilities and different tasks within the functions, whether that's marketing, sales, etc. But also, I think this is true across the rest of the organization, okay? Everybody affects customer satisfaction, revenues and churn and risk of churn. And everybody contributes to the success, whether you're in service, sales, etc. So, it's so important that the CRO, but frankly, I think the CEO sets common goals and objectives that everybody has a participation in. Because if you've got a goal to grow the company's customers' revenues, if you're doing something that isn't aligned to that, why are you doing it at all? Sales targets as well. Are they not just for sales? I don't think. Targets should be shared, certainly by marketing and sales, and they've got skin in the game, okay? The old adage of what gets measured gets done is really important. It's true. This automatically bonds teams together and makes sure that they're pulling in the same direction. We've all got the same goal, the same KPIs, even if they're in slightly different measures, then we're all going to pull in the same proverbial direction. And of course, the governance, the monitoring of this set of KPIs needs to mimic those. So we have the same agenda with the same KPIs at our operating reviews, whether you're in marketing, service, sales. So you're talking about the same topics, the same goals. And yes, there'll be deeper detail that then varies depending on the part of the operation that you're in. I think I also would argue that even RevOps and support should have the same KPIs. Again, the revenue target is in everybody's objectives, isn't it? Even if you're not directly selling, you should certainly have an element of your end of year performance and your objectives, even if you're not a revenue generating individual. And frankly, you've done this many a time. Make sure those KPIs go way beyond the CRO's empire, right across other parts of the organization. Thirdly, this is all about communication. It's a critical success factor for me. The best way to create confusion and ambiguity, I think, is to mix up your terminology across the teams. So, some good examples, you'll be able to think of these yourself, right? But firstly, just make sure that the most used descriptors used across the business are using a common language. And I do see, within organic growth with companies that have made some acquisitions, and it's perfectly sensible to do that, obviously. They bolt them together, but they just don't spend enough time on this to just make sure they're using the same language. Some examples I see, different pipeline definitions. Somebody's suspect is another one's prospect, or they call it something else, or they call it a lead. Or indeed, when you look at the funnel, the probability percentages vary wildly between, one man's 20% is another girl 30%, etc. There's no consistent definition or set of criteria that describes them. even at the sales stages, or indeed when you start talking about the sales methodologies or the definitions, it gets even worse, doesn't it? There's no harm in having people using different styles of selling, but when it comes to using terminology, it's vital, I think, that we just bring people together so there's no misunderstanding. I mean, misunderstanding can be incredibly dangerous. Another big manhole cover that I've seen people fall down is when it comes to forecasting. One person's committed deal is another person's sort of half-baked forecasts, right? So it's so important to speak in a common language with a, I don't think you need me to labor the point, but I see this one as a really, really common soft disabler of unification, of collaboration. Um, I think as well, just per the vision point we talked about earlier on, we need to make sure that we keep reinforcing this. So it's one thing setting these definitions up and setting the vision, but we need to make sure we're reinforcing it on a regular basis via whatever it is, drumbeat of monthly communications, whatever you might do in your own organization, on simple notes out to your teams, webinars, roadshows, whatever they are. Make sure that we're reinforcing and taking the chance to just use the right language. I think all of these communications need to have the customer at the heart of them. Lovely to showcase how we've helped customers achieve their goals and increase their loyalty through what we've done. But again, repeat the common language as we do it. So important. Here's a fourth one. Um, Create a single customer view. There can only be in any company one version of a customer. Okay. Now, operating models, as I said earlier, can be a major source of conflict when it comes to, dealing with the customer. Particularly, I see this in product-centric organizations where you have organizations who have organized themselves in the sort of verticals of products. They actually create competing sales teams. I can cite an example, the name will remain nameless, but I remember working for quite a while with a very large global shipping services company who provided a great company actually, provided all sorts of services around safety solutions, crewing, people, catering services, technical services, and so on. Um, each one of those areas had their own P&L, and each one of those sent salespeople in to see the same buyer of the same major shipping companies. So literally the chap or girl would walk in, open their coat and say, "Do you want one of these?" And it might be a crewing solution. The next chap would pop in and try to sell them some technical services. The same customer, rather than having a coordinated approach to that one customer to understand what they really needed, and then maybe blend some of those together with a real compelling set of solutions. So, competing operating models and those product silos are in my experience, witnessed some horrendous competing. So frankly, even if there is that complexity and you have silos of products, then at least have one lead account manager or one lead salesperson or customer success manager who takes primary responsibility of that customer and then galvanizes the rest of the business behind them. Um, Equally, there should only ever be one customer database, and this backs up the last point really. I'm ignoring financial data and some of the stuff that the CFO will have, of course. But there should just be that one single repository that all departments leverage, whether you're in sales, marketing, customer success, service, etc. You should have that one window on the customer's world, be able to see everything that's happening regarding those customers. And again, large organizations have much more complex versions of this. Small businesses may have just a spreadsheet, but typically we all know that we're talking about some kind of CRM system, customer relationship management system. I don't care whether it's a large wielded 5,000 user Salesforce machine or if it's a spreadsheet. There should only be one view of a customer that everybody understands and can have visibility of what's going on. So we don't have this uncoordinated, unsolicited approach. And then within that, make sure that it has a very clear lead of that customer. There's an owner of that customer, whether that's account manager, customer success manager, whoever it might be. It's clear, right? The customer is king here. Behind that, of course, I'm just slightly digressing on this one, but there should be one set of segmentation principles too. So, yeah, we should always know who our most important customer is. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of segmentation. I've written quite a lot of material on this and held webinars on it, but there has to be, one set of segmentation principles that make sure that we know which customers we're prioritizing, but also how we're servicing those customers to suit them in a way that they want to be served. And that can't be different depending on which part of the organization we're talking about. Marketing can't treat a customer differently to a sales organization, for example. We need to have the same approach. It doesn't mean to say that service doesn't have different, platinum, gold, silver levels of service linked to that segmentation model, but there has to be one set of segmentation principles. Again, don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much today, but just want to put that point on the table. And indeed, when it comes to new prospects, new customers, there can only be one view of the universe, or should be, based upon a strategic approach, i.e., the attractiveness of that market and your capabilities. Um, but not based upon one particular product view or one siloed view of the customer's sort of universe. It needs to take into account all of your products and with a coordinated approach. Okay. And then finally, I do think there should be a transparent definition of the customer journey. So very clear handoffs between marketing and sales, account management, customer success. I'm not sure how many of you have actually tried dealing with your own organizations or tried buying something or tried getting a solution sorted by ringing up your service desk. But that's something else that will certainly give you a bit of an interesting view. Account development plans, again, don't want to digress too far now, but that's another topic that acts as the glue for the most important customers, the more complex ones that warrant an account development plan. A great way to glue the teams together informally and formally, where you have these silos. Where are we going? What are the risks? Who are the key stakeholders? Just a plan on a page. I'm a big fan of an ADP on a page, but that acts as the single repository for the strategy with a customer, the single customer view. How about this one then? Just try to reject some cross-silo collaboration. I like to create little agile teams to attack problems. I mean, you can think of better ideas than I can. I'm sure you do this to some degree. But I like to create cross-sector little boards. A good example I remember using a lot of is the proposition roadmap, where you bring in product teams, technical teams, sales and marketing together, automatically pulls those silos together and has that common goal and really does encourage that non-partisan behavior. So the proposition idea is that, great news for product managers, by the way, or proposition managers, because, they're building products that customers say they want because they've had the feedback from the team that's actually talking to the horse's mouth. Takes the heat off the project manager, in fact, doesn't it? Because he's got an excuse. You told me that the customer wanted this product, so I built it. So it's a great way of bringing people together. I think another example, I think in a SaaS business is to create feedback loops. What's going on between lead generation activity, content generation, etc. Things happen at the speed of light in a SaaS business, so it's even more important to get as much cross-fertilization and must input as possible. Another little tactic I use a lot is build a win room. Build a win room or a war room, depending on what language you like to use. Why? I think it's a great example of visible collaboration. It also creates a lovely sense of urgency. It feels different, so it must be serious. There's a war room here, the win room, whether it's a virtual one or a physical one. You know what I mean? It's sort of building of dashboards, put customer brands on the wall, leaderboards, all your campaign material. A great meeting environment. Same with the virtual room, and I can talk about this and got some free tools you can use on it as well if you want them. But it's just a great way of reinforcing the team working, reinforcing, bringing together. It's like a cockpit where the kind of material, the insight, the data is there, perhaps from your CRM systems, etc. But it's a place, virtual or physical, where everybody meets, brainstorms, reviews progress. I like it a lot because you get feedback in an immediate circular fashion. Decisions get made much quicker and everybody can see the direct impact on results. So a great way to get team working done in action. As well as possible, and again, without getting too deep and meaningful here, because I know that everyone uses a variety of different platforms and tools. But I do like the idea of making sure that wherever possible, take the opportunity to integrate certain platforms and tools, particularly those that facilitate collaboration. There's a couple that you'll know more than I do. For project management software is a good example. Communication tools, shared databases, all of those things can streamline workflows and obviously improve communication across departments. I think anything where you can invest in a technology solution that helps break down a silo and promote collaboration is pretty essential in most modern organizations today. Some examples that I see that work nicely. Slack and Chatter in Salesforce, it sort of encourages real-time feedback, nice and informal on whatever it might be, market dynamics, what's going on in the customer world, but something that anybody across that business, particularly if you have something like Salesforce or any other CRM platform, marketing, sales, service can just put comments in there. Oh, I noticed this change. Did you notice this competitor was doing this? You know the sort of thing I mean. Other examples, yeah, project management templates. I think even if you have something more formal or informal, a shared workspace where you can share plans on the initiatives rather than having to sort of email documents knocking around. CRM, of course, is the other classic where you're kind of immediately just having that one repository without repeating yourself. But I think just have a look around at where you could think about integrating or getting rid of some independent tools or sheets that you see circulating around the business. Here's one of my favorites, actually. Best way to create a sense of camaraderie and, along with a lot of fun is to kind of just launch a company-wide campaign, but one that engages as many people across the business, across the silos as possible. It really creates a boost of energy, boost of activity, and a sense of urgency. Also helps embed all the things I've talked about earlier. That common language. What am I talking about? Yeah, I'm talking about a time-bound piece of selling activity, frankly, that involves everybody. It can obviously generate incremental revenues. You know what a campaign is. You don't need me to tell you. Um, but my best example, my favorite example that I've injected here is a back to the customer floor campaign, which is it by definition means anybody can join in, whether you're the CFO, the product guys, whether you're a lawyer, obviously the sales and service and customer success, the marketeers can join in. But it's an opportunity to get in front of the customer's back office to understand how customers are working in their world. It's got nothing to do with your products or selling anything officially. Of course, it is about selling because you're understanding more about the customer. But customers tend to love this one. Every time I've launched it and I've seen it launched in other businesses, customers think, "Oh, you've taken a real effort to understand my business. I love what you're doing." And when you come back to base, you use the win room or the war room. You can send photos of a day, helping pull an aircraft out of the airport, or packing bags at the local supermarket, or serving customers in the restaurant, whatever it is, and whatever your industry is. Customers love it, and it creates a huge amount of energy and cross fertilization across the teams. And obviously, you can inject your own celebrations and team leaderboards and prizes for the wackiest engagement and so on and so forth. Coupled with that, I do like to get the execs involved on this one. So make sure not just as a CRO, but of course, all of your people, including the CEO, frankly, the more the merrier. Lead by example, get the other department heads involved because it just demonstrates by leadership, by example, that, well, if they're doing it, then I can do it, right? It demonstrates that urgency, also demonstrates a real customer-centric credibility, okay? Also, it leverages the skills. I mean, it's nothing better to have one of your lawyers talk to one of their lawyers and just share war stories, right? It's got nothing to do with selling your products or services necessarily, but it just creates stickiness between your two organizations as well as the fun and the breaking down the silos piece that we're talking about today. I think this, frankly, should be a personal objective for all CROs and all execs to join in this type of campaign and demonstrate the kind of collaboration. And then lastly on this one, make sure that you attend events together, whether they're, industry events or whatever they may be, but make sure that you have a cross section of speakers from different silos who are maybe subject matter experts or whatever they may be from different departments. Doesn't have to be just sales selling, I guess is the point I'm making. Um, Make sure you're delivering continual training. And I don't just mean the obvious training. We'll have training in our own key skills, but I like the idea of cross training and developing skills from other departments. It just offers opportunities to learn about the other departments and how those roles can help, foster greater understanding, greater empathy across the silos. Once you gain insights in different perspectives from other functions, just by definition, it leads to better collaboration. I like the idea of like the idea of getting heads of silos to present to the other parts of the business. Again, this is not a new phenomenon, right? But I just wonder, how do we do it enough? Are we doing it consistently? And are we really making sure we make this a priority as we think about breaking down the silos? I also think it's important to understand the interdependencies of different departments. We see a lot of blame games going on, don't we, across these businesses? Why sales blames marketing, marketing blames the product team for not getting the product ready in time, product teams blame the technology guys because they haven't scheduled their IT stuff on the stack on the whiteboard. CIOs blame the finance. It goes on, doesn't it? But I think just understanding the sequence of events within each other's worlds just helps with the empathy and helps appreciate, what's going on. So you start to get more appreciation, in other words, and not criticism. It's more positive, less negative. Um, Also think, just as an aside, I used to love doing this a lot when I was an operator, is just leverage customers to help the training, get them into the team meetings wherever you can and give them a day in the life of a customer. Again, it just externalizes people's mindsets a little bit, takes their mind off this sort of internal politics and rubbish that goes on in your own backyard and just gets a reprioritization in people's heads, as well as obviously educating everybody in the business around what really matters and the challenges that customers are facing. Customers, frankly, just don't care about your silos and boundaries. They just care about selling more to their customers. So, a whistle-stop tour. I promised I'd do this quickly. I'll come on to some free tools in a second, but just to summarize then, and please do a screenshot of this or watch the recording. But that's what I've gone through at breakneck speed. One, set that vision, just get the story aligned, get everybody galvanized under the one North Star. Share and align the goals as much as you possibly can to make sure that everybody's got that skin in the game. What gets measured gets done, as I say. And speak in a common language. You'll see these acquisitions or just natural scope creep where people have got a slightly different version of the truth. Make sure you're aware of the critical bits of language, whether it's pipeline orientated, whatever it might be. Get those harmonized. There's only one customer, number four. Try and inject as much cross-silo collaboration as you can, whether that's, as I say, whether it's just small groups and teams solving problems, etc., etc. Criticizing and giving feedback on plans or account development plans is a great idea as well. Integrate tools and technology, particularly for those that collaboration like Chatter, etc. Launch that campaign. I want to see everybody here with a back to the floor campaign by Monday, please. No, honestly, seriously, it's a great way to just get some fun in the business and get the priorities and get yourself customer centric. And of course, lastly, I've just talked about the continual training, but particularly an appreciation of what's going on over the fence across the boundary. So I hope that makes some sense so far. I just want to signpost before I get onto some free tools on the leadership stuff. Just want to signpost my own services briefly. As I said, spent the past 8 years coaching, advising, mentoring CROs in a variety of industries, large and small. Very flattered by the feedback and the momentum. I keep my mentees for many years, which is lovely to see. Some people have been with me for many years. In fact, even when they've moved abroad, come back and still say hi, meet me for a beer in London. I've just opened up an additional block of time, which is why I'm advertising this now. I'm doing less flying around the world, to be honest, which has opened up a few more schedules for me. So I have some slots if anybody wants some mentoring. So um, basically, what I'm hearing is CROs find that they are a little isolated. Back to what I was saying around the lack of training, really. They want to sort of get a bit of extra knowledge, a bit of extra wisdom and experience. They obviously want to accelerate their own personal development, particularly if they're moving upwards and onwards. But they just want some trusted advice in a safe environment, really. And that's kind of what I offer. So as part of my mentoring and coaching, I have a very structured approach to it. As you can see, you won't be able to read all this on the detail, but I can send you, you'll see this on the website, or I can send you a brochure. There's a structure to it, but there's complete flexibility. And in reality, I have a complete cross section of relationships with my mentees. Sometimes they just want to understand what they should do at the next board meeting, help them with a particular problem, with a problem person, or whatever it might be. But we also have a very structured approach to the way that the CRO department and the role should be operated. But again, simple, jargon-free, ways that even I can understand. It's been incredibly successful and people seem to like it. So the punchline here is I'm offering, if you just want to have a free chemistry call, a quick chat with me to understand a bit more about it, there's no commitment needed. Just if you want to find out more about it, please reach out to me. Just send me an email or text or whatever it wants to be. No problem at all. It'd be lovely to see you. Now, free tools. So as I said, as part of my advisory work with private equity companies, and of course mentoring, I've developed quite a series of tools and templates with that one objective in mind, and that's help the practical execution of the theory. So I've built this as an operator, not as a consultant. Um, so these tools apply to all stages of the sort of customer journey and the CRO's world in four major blocks, really. And please, if you go to my website, you'll see this illustrated easier than I can talk it through. But first piece is all around optimizing the organization, how to build a return on investment, how to stop doing things, how to build the organization, etc. Second one's all about growing and retaining customers, which is, segmentation, all the stuff you'd expect to see in that bucket. Winning new customers, which includes, defining the market, some ready reckoners around new business, how to quantify revenues, etc., etc. And there's the fourth piece is all around leadership and managing and controlling. So there's a nice few leadership models, governance templates, etc. Um, there's some particularly relevant tools to what we talked about today. For example, there's a really nice campaign planner I've created and a slide deck that goes with it. There's a win room planner in there as well. But basically, feel free to have a look at the website. There's a lot more than meets the eye on the website. But if you want anything, I'll be delighted to send you any of them for free of charge. Just contact me if you think they're going to be helpful. Have a look. If they're not helpful, don't use it. There we go. Um, so that's what the website looks like when you get there. I won't bore you again with it. Um, but I do write a bi-weekly newsletter, which I know some of you are already reading on LinkedIn. If you just connect with me, if you're not already connected, just reach out. You'll be able to see that. You can subscribe to the newsletter. I keep it short and sweet because no one wants to read for too long, do they? On a sort of hot topic that I think might provoke a bit of interest. Feel free to follow me on that. Also, I do tend to do a monthly webinar. Some of them are recorded, like this one. But as I say, I hope this session has provoked a bit of thought, and you've taken away some ideas for your own business. Please feel free to reach out to me, as I say, if you want any more. And of course, do look at that website, www.optilium.co.uk. There we go, 45 minutes on the nose, as promised. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for coming, and I hope we meet again.